Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. A very warm welcome to yet another session of Quest interview series that we have been doing for some time now. And let me begin with a small prayer. Vakratunda Mahakaya Koti Surya Samaprabha Nirvignam Kurume Deva Sarvakaryeshu Sarvada Sadashiva Samarambham Shankaracharya Madhyamam अस्मदाचार्य पर्यन्तां वन्दे गुरुपरम्परां श्रीगुरुभ्यो नमः हरि ओम. Today we have a very special guest, Dr. Raj Gopalaswamy ji, who is joining us from the United States. Just a very brief introduction to him before we go ahead. Dr. Raj is currently the Global Technology Director of Global R&D at Novelis, which is part of Aditya Birla Group of Companies. He was born in Chennai and studied in Chennai and Trichy in Tamil Nadu before going to college at BITS Pilani in Rajasthan. He then traveled to United States and went through rigorous science and engineering education and graduated with an MS in engineering mechanics from Missouri Science and Technology and a PhD in engineering science and mechanics from Penn State University. And later he did MBA in economics and finance from the University of Chicago's Booth Business School. And however, since childhood, Dr. Raj had been interested in Indian textual tradition, Indian culture, the religious tradition, and other things. So we will be exploring this last part as well as how it connects to his larger journey, today's interview. Very warm welcome to you, sir. Thank you for agreeing for this interview.
Namaste, and thank you so much for the kind introduction. I'm really looking forward to our discussion today. So we can go ahead whenever you're ready. Very excited to be here. Thank you for having me also.
Thank you, Dr. Raj. My first question is, you have such a prolific background in science and business and everything. So I just narrated it to our audience. What I'm interested more is about your personal journey, your spiritual journey, I could say. So tell us about your early life and some of the major events, some important people who influenced you, who shaped who you are today in a deeper ways, your personality, perhaps spiritual inspirations also. Do share about that.
Sure, Nitinji. I can start right from childhood, from back in Chennai and maybe even before that. So I was born in Chennai actually, and right from the beginning. So I studied the first half, went to school in Vidya Mandir in Chennai, and of course, we all know in a lot of schools in the south and all over India, actually, we start with a prayer in the morning. So at that time, our school prayer, and I think it might be the same now, was Sahana Bhavatu. And then we also used to read one of the Shanti Patas, Sanno Mitrasam Varunaha. In Vidya Mandir. We used to learn that later in the morning in one of the classes. So I do remember those sessions, but there was not any real meaning behind them other than we all knew we were small children, kids playing around, and it just brought some discipline, some routine. We did not know the exact meaning behind those types of prayers, but as you can see, I still remember them. It was more than 45 years ago. So it left some impressions, of course, on the mind. So I would say that that was one of the key things that kept me thinking about them. what are these prayers, and they're in a different language, Sanskrit, while we were learning in English medium, that type of thing. So Vidya Mandir was a very nice, interesting. That was the childhood, and the other thing, and I will mix the people who were a big influence along with these events. I don't think we can separate them really,
Yes.
and maybe we can write them separately. But when we are thinking, there are always people who influence us around us, right? So at the same time, my parents, of course, they were huge influences, and me being the only kid in the household, I will say I had a very interesting and happy childhood. So I would not say I was spoiled because I was the only child, but I used to get different experiences. So then we moved to Trichy, and my father was working there in close to Trichy in a cement factory. And at that time, I was living in a colony. It was the Dalmia Cement company. So in the colony, there was a very nice tradition of going to the temple. People visited the temple after coming back from the factory, from the company, every day in the evening. And I got a chance. So talking about the influence, both my mother and father, they thought I should do that also. Of course, I wanted to play all the time. I watched a lot of movies, went to the cinema theater, all of that. But at the same time, in the evenings, I knew I had to go to the temple and spend some time there, praying, or just spending a few minutes and coming back. Later on, I joined some Veda classes with the temple priest there, the head priest. And we learned Rudram, Chamakam, several suktams and all of that from the Yajurveda. Those were all, I remember a lot of times, a lot of evenings sitting and reciting, the standard practice, right? 2 times you recite after your guru recites the verse. So I do remember all of that. I have some of my old Veda books here in Sanskrit, the Taittiriya Mantra Koshaha and all of that. So I would say a key influence of creating some curiosity was created by my father, because he insisted that I go and learn this and by heart all the Vedas. Although I had no clue what I was doing, I did not have understanding of all the verses. But sometimes I used to wonder. In even there, you start with the Shanti Pada, right? And the head priest used to either start with Sahana Vavatu or one of the prayers, and there was at least some intersection with what I experienced earlier. So he was a huge influence as a teacher, as a guru. Again, creating that curiosity, and he did not have, honestly, there was not enough time to explain the meaning of every sentence or anything. Sometimes he used to say, if you take Purusha Suktam, it describes God with so many thousand hands, or things like that, but we never got deep into it. So that was the second half of school. And let me know if I'm going very slow, and I can speed it up also. So the later part of school, me and my mother, we moved to Trichy, so I could focus more on this 11th standard, 12th standard, board exams are coming, all that. When we moved there, I also was going to a Catholic school in Trichy. I went to Campion High School. And, when we had this, we had a period of, one period dedicated to religion. Okay. And in that period, you could either go to the church, to the chapel, which was on campus. The chapel is still there. And or you can join moral instruction. And of course, not being a Catholic, being a Hindu, I was in the moral instruction, or the MI class, as we used to call it. So I went to the MI class several times. But again, I've been going to the temple, I'm learning all the Vedas and trying to understand the meaning. And I had the same curiosity here to go and see what is actually happening inside the church. So I joined several of my Catholic friends, and some of us also, there was no restriction. You could go either way. So I used to participate in catechism class, went to church several times, and what I realized, at least, at that age, I realized that everybody was praying. There was a common thing. The images and the environment was a little different, but everybody was praying. So obviously, the thing in my mind at that time, which was a big influence again, all the teachers there, they were all part of the Saint Gabriel brothers, the Jesuit priests. So they were, I would say, a big influence. They taught us basic values. They were not trying to put too many of the Catholic principles into our minds, because we were all students. They all knew we were going to both the MI class and the catechism class. Of course, there was some religion there also, from the Bible and so forth. But at the end of the day, I realized that there was a very common thread, that we were trying to create some discipline, put the mind at peace, do some prayer. So those were pretty good influences. I think it at least filled my mind with some curiosity to keep learning more, understand the meaning of different things, and trying to understand what is actually important. So that was school, as you had mentioned. So I did go to Pilani for college, and the biggest influence there was two main things, and I will lump them into. There were so many, as we all go to college, there's so many events, so many people that influence us, right? And kind of shape our thinking and approach to life. A lot of times our foundations are laid in college, and it was no different for me. Here, I would say, if I were to group all of my friends, there are some very close friends, and we all continue to be in touch, and we frequently talk and debate and so many other things. We have had hundreds or thousands of experiences together. They are all, and they continue to be a significant influence on my thinking and approach. At the same time, our professors also were very big influences. In Pilani, there is no, it used to be, I'm not 100% sure if it is true now, but it used to be that you had a choice whether to go to class or not. And I'm talking late 80s, early 90s time period. So in a lot of instances, if you did not have interest in a class, I'll give you an example, and Professor VK may not be very happy to hear this, but there was a class called linear algebra, and we had in school never experienced that. So a lot of us stayed back. This was even in the first semester, and there were several other classes like that. And during the course of those 4 years of college, I skipped a lot of classes. Some of our professors, of course, at that time were not at all happy, and they might smile when they hear this. But what we used to do if we did not go to class was a huge part of our education, actually. It was not just going and sitting in class and studying at doing the academics. It was developing, it was actually mega influence on relationships, how we were interacting with each other. We used to spend so much time together. If you think about it, you're not just sitting in class and listening, and it's not one way. It was always two-way and multiple way conversations, interactions happening.
Were there
So I think,
any spiritual groups, etc., there in Pilani also?
there were a lot of spiritual groups
That you are
that
part of, I mean.
yeah, I was coming to that. I will be very honest. I wasn't exactly a part of a group. We used to go to the temple occasionally, and I was not very, let us say, dedicated or sincere at that time. This was just how it was. I want to portray the reality, and when my friends see this, I know they will agree. We were not. So when we did not go to class, right? What did we do? We spent a lot of time together discussing, debating movies and everything. But religion, philosophy, science, all of those were part of those debates and part of those conversations. I personally did not, I did not have a great discipline of going to the temple. I used to go when I felt like. Some friends used to come pull me and do that. But what I can tell you is, I was always just that curiosity from the Vidya Mandir and the Campion, the Trichy days existed, and it was always deep in my mind. Okay, so I still wanted to understand. So I went to the library and rented several books on philosophy, religion, among all the other books that we were reading. And that was another thing that we used to do. We used to listen to a lot of music, but at the same time, we used to read a lot. And one of the influences, I was coming to this actually, one of the things that happened was I went and rented, the great Radhakrishnan's Principal Upanishads. And of course, most of us, if not all of us, know that it is a masterpiece. But being a masterpiece and being, Sarvapalli Radhakrishnan, it is not very easy to immediately grasp what he is talking about. And it's the Principal Upanishads is just go straight into the deep philosophy and thinking. And it starts, I think, I have the book here. At that time, at least the Pilani edition, the edition we had, the first one was Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. And I can tell you, I am just listening to Brihadaranyaka Upanishad lectures as we speak. And, in the last few weeks, I have been listening to it, Swami Guru Parananda's lectures. I had no clue what I was reading at that time. Absolutely no clue. But something kept me going. I just finished the book, okay? But I did not grasp anything. I knew that this was very important. And that was it. Then I came to the US, and during the master's time, I would say the mind got very distracted from all this, from this influences and everything. I was very focused on studying and getting the academic performance higher and all that stuff, which also happened. There were different sets of friends that we made. Who again, very strong relationships with all of them. They had quite a bit of influence on my thinking and several other things. And of course, we stay in touch. So the masters, I would say, in the 2-year period, it was kind of a gap in the spirituality journey. But I went to Penn State, which you mentioned, and there it came back. It came back like, the ocean goes away and then suddenly like a big wave, it comes back, right? It was like that because I was doing my PhD. I had a little bit more time to think, and the PhD itself, you are supposed to focus on one area and go deep into it and do the research and all that. But what I learned was, and this was a big influence, was that it is actually not that. it is exactly the opposite. They would like you to broaden your knowledge and broaden your foundations, and just focus on learning and understanding, and then coming up with original ideas and concepts to progress knowledge, right? At the same time, because of that freedom of thinking and freedom with a little bit of time, I went and did the same thing I did in Pilani. I went and rented Dr. Radhakrishnan's book again, and went through the principal Upanishads again. And all along, I did not. My friends can shout at me or scream at me for this, but nobody told me, "Hey, did you start at the very basic? Go and read the Bhagavad Gita first, and try to practice the teachings of the Gita first. At least the first 3 chapters, talking about karma and karma yoga, and why don't you try to live that first and then get into all this Upanishad?" So I think the ego was operating it was very strong.
So when did you meet, when did you come across the teachings of Swami Guru Parananda ji, and have you met him personally?
Yes, I did meet him personally, but it was much before that. So I can tell you, I'll fast forward several years. So again, the conclusion was I still did not understand Dr. Radhakrishnan's book, but it was still there. I mean, it was always playing in the mind. I will come to Swami Guru Parananda. I want to mention my grandfather also at the same time. So he used to live in Kumbakonam. This is my mother's father. His name is A.R. Seshya Shastrigal, and he worked in Kanchi Mutt for almost 35 years, I think. He lived there with Paramacharya and did a lot of service and different things there. So as you can imagine, he was pretty disciplined, and he followed all the rituals and everything. He was kind of a orthodox practitioner, I would say, having been at Kanchi Mutt, and he was a significant influence. And he used to tell me he and my grandmother, and even on my father's side, my grandmother used to tell me a lot of stories. So those were, I don't want to miss saying that, because those were huge influences. And so I had this on my mind, my grandfather's teachings and some of the advice he used to give me that time, right? So fast forward, so Penn State happened, then I came to work in Chicago and moved to Atlanta. So in 2016, we had a reunion. A BITS Pilani reunion. That was our 25th year reunion. So we all went to Pilani, and my friend Rajesh, another Rajesh Sengamedu, his name is, we are all classmates, and he had done his electrical, and he was working in California. He's still there. So he had gotten into over 20 years ago into the practice of meditation, doing yoga, and he had become a yoga practitioner, certified teacher and all that. So he was a pretty big influence on several of us. During that reunion, we learned this about him. I did not know him well when we were in Pilani, but he kind of got us all thinking. And another classmate of mine, Uday Sriram, he was also into the practice of meditation. So listening to them and talking to them brought all these things together. The curiosity to understand our scriptures, as well as trying to, become a little bit more disciplined and direct my thinking and spending more time with spirituality. At that time, I did not know this, but actually Swami Guru Parananda ji was Rajesh's guru. I had no idea. He used to hold some meditation sessions in Zoom and all that since we came back in 2016. So for 2 to 3 years, I was doing that, and I was getting into it a little bit. Then COVID came in 2020, right? When that happened, the I was able to get more deeply into meditation. And instead of, I used to do a lot of long distance running. So instead of that, I started walking. And when I was walking, I thought this is a great opportunity to get back into, the same journey. So, um, I became very disciplined with the walking. I'll walk really long distance, 5 miles, 6 miles, something like that. And when I did that, I was listening to podcasts. So, and if you read my book, which will come out soon, you will see that I listen to a lot of different types of podcasts. Shankar Vedantam is a very popular person here in the US. He runs a podcast called Hidden Brain, and which talks about different things about how the human brain works and why we do things and why we behave a certain way. But that still was not giving me what I was actually looking for, which is a good understanding. Why are we praying? Why are we following a lot of these spiritual practices? What is it that is actually our Swamijis and sages are saying? So I searched up Upanishads. This is how it happened. I searched up Upanishads. So in that, there are a lot of different things going on. I landed on Swami Guruparanandaji's podcast on various Upanishads. And in that, if you go into the podcast info, there is a website, it's purnalayam.org. So I went to purnalayam.org, and Swamiji has actually put down the order in which you have to listen to the Upanishads, starting with Mundaka Upanishad. So I did not waste any time. I said, okay, Mundaka Upanishad. So I clicked that. I started listening to Swamiji's Mundaka Upanishad, which was just mind blowing. It was just completely that 1.5 hours. I still remember walking in the park here. I was just wondering, why is this not explained this way at all? I have never heard an Upanishad being explained this way. And Swamiji's lectures were in Tamil. They're all in Tamil. So because of that, because my native language is Tamil, it was just more, I was able to relate to it a lot more. So that is when I first listened to his lecture, and I called Rajesh, my meditation guru, immediately. And I told him, hey, I'm starting to listen to these lectures. I'm sure you have listened to Swamiji's lectures. He said, Day, I will use some Tamil slang here. Day, that is my guru. Swamiji is my guru. So that is how, then I was very surprised pleasantly. And he told me, that is the time when he told me, hey, why are you listening to these Upanishads? So I had a long conversation with him, and he said, you have to start with the Gita. That is the most fundamental teaching there is. And I said, yeah, I'm curious about Gita also, but I would like to learn Upanishads. But anyway, so at the end of the day, he kind of nudged me in the direction of Bhagavad Gita. And Swamiji has the essence of Gita lectures, 50 lectures that in the same podcast. So I started listening to the Gita, and of course, completely got sucked into the lectures, and I listened to them several times actually to get a really good understanding of what he meant. And in late 2020, when I went to Trichy to visit my parents, and there were a lot of COVID around us, right? I was quarantining for a month. And when during that time, I said, if I have to really understand that, I need to start writing and try to translate what Swamiji is saying in Tamil into English. And at the same time, I felt that Bhagavad Gita, Upanishads, all of the teachings were quite scientific and quite logical and philosophical. So in addition to, of course, it is closely connected with the Hinduism religion, but they are actually very, very logical. If you start with Karma Yoga and all that. So that is how it kind of came about. And so I would technically say from 2020, I have been very deeply, involved and influenced in the direction of spirituality. So I know I gave a very long explanation.
No, no, it's a good thing. We get to see very different aspects of your journey from a, Vidya Mandir experience, initial impressions to very different type of influence in Catholic school to the principal Upanishads, which has been a guiding light for you in some way or the other. And then, of course, Swami Guru Paranandaji's lectures. So, your next book that you mentioned, is it the English translations of Swamiji's talks?
So I started off as translations, and you also asked me if I met Swamiji. Yes, I did meet Swamiji early last year. Me and three of our friends, we have a Gita satsang every Sunday, which was started by my friend Rajesh 2-3 years ago. So we all joined together and we traveled to Purnalayam, which is close to Chennai. And we met Swamiji at that time, and he gave us blessings, and we spent quite a bit of time talking to him with so many questions. So I started doing the translations, and about a year. So when I got into it for about a month, I spoke to Rajesh and said, "Hey, I'm working on this translation of Swamiji's lectures. I really need to get his blessings before I start doing it continuously start doing this thing." And I had no idea where this was going. I was just doing it like you think of it as a Shravanam and Mananam, right? Just trying to understand it and thinking about it kind of thing. So I always, when I write, I tend to understand things better. So that's why I was doing it. So Rajesh said, "Yeah, you should write to him and see if you can see if he responds." He usually responds very quickly. So I wrote a long email to Swamiji and said, "Swamiji, I really feel this is a very scientific and I want to kind of translate your lectures and also be able to have it accessible to youngsters and other people in the Western hemisphere." With a kind of a scientific perspective on everything, and I have just started doing it. Can I seek your blessings for continuing to do this? So he replied, and his reply was just he just said blessings, and that's it. That's just that one word. And I said, "Okay, now what do I do?" So I called Rajesh again. I did not call Swamiji, and he picks up the phone, he answers it himself. But I did not call Swamiji. I called Rajesh and I asked him, "So this is what I got." Then he said, "What are you waiting for? Just go, just continue." At that time, what I thought I would do, I changed the way I was writing. I did not do direct translation. Because Swamiji goes off in different directions when he explains. I tried to keep the core of what he is talking about, but what I did was try to make it more interesting for the readers. In the sense, if you are listening to Swamiji's lectures, they are very captivating and interesting. And it also assumes an understanding of the Tamil language, and it assumes some basic understanding of the scriptures, Vedas. It basically is for our audience, right? If you are a Tamilian, if you are sitting in front of him and learning, it's for that audience, and that's how it should be. That's what Swamiji did. So what I decided to do was, I will do it in the Upanishad style, which means Guru is teaching his students, and who, by the way, there is no gender differentiation here. The Guru may or may not be a man or a woman or whoever, and the students also are a mix of boys and girls, and they are young and old. And I never really get into describing who the students are, who the Guru is. There is a Guru under a banyan tree, and the Guru is teaching his Shishyas, and he is lecturing. The students ask questions, and we go through the Bhagavad Gita chapters.
So
That's
your
how
book
it is
is
structured.
in a narrative format, basically,
It's in a
following
very
the.
narrative format, and while the guru answers the students, there are lots of stories that he picks on: modern, ancient, Indian history, European history, Greek, Roman, you name it. And I also uh, figured that this was the freedom to go and do some research. So I researched into a lot of ancient Greek philosophy, Roman teachings, and all those things. I try to bring all those in. Also get into addressing some of the questions which I personally believe, and I think a lot of us agree, that the Gita and the Upanishads have answers to everything, lot of the deep philosophical questions. And they also have answers to a lot of scientific questions. Of course, at that time, when these scriptures had been basically given to us, the science advancement was not much. The technology was not that advanced, but the intuition was there. Our sages and rishis at that time, they were able to just sit and do thought experiments and come up with, what the solution should more or less look like, and those are just priceless, right? So this research that I started doing went off in different tangents. So the guru gives a lot of stories like this. That's how the narrative is written. And I had a terrific time doing that, because I was researching and I was putting all these things in the guru's mouth while he was teaching. And I was imagining Swamiji talking about all this. And sometimes Swamiji does that too in his lectures.
Just for clarity, so in this new format of the book, what portion of Swamiji's teachings are there? I mean, or is it more of a your distilled understanding of Swamiji's teachings that you have put in a narrative format?
Yes, I would say it is more of the second. It's primarily my understanding and interpretation of what Swamiji says in his lectures. However, having said that, I would say the foundational aspects, I have not changed anything. So, for example, if he says that, in 2.11 or 2.16, 17 from the Gita, he goes deep into what, Krishna or, Bhagavan is talking about there, and advising and giving a lot of this, a lot of his teachings to Arjuna. I have kept those foundational aspects the same. So you will see elements of Swamiji's lectures almost exactly translated from the Tamil into English. And then, the guru in the book goes off on different tangents and brings in stories. Those are my interpretations. So that is how I have structured it.
Wonderful. Very exciting to hear about the book. Look forward to reading it whenever it comes out. So,
Sure.
moving ahead, you mentioned twice or thrice about how what attracted to Hindu philosophy was that it is scientific. So that's exactly what you mentioned. So I wanted to ask you, what exactly do you mean by the term scientific here? Because I think there are different understandings of this term and different ways it is looked in. For example, in the West, for example, the
Yes.
religion, the Catholic, the Abrahamic religion and science are seen as two separate, contradictory or unreconciliatory approaches. But in India, for example, we do not have that opposition view of religion and science. But however, there is also those aspects, such as, for example, one of the defining aspect of modern science is the notion of truth tests of falsifiability and verifiability, right? Something has to be true,
Yes.
it has to pass this test of verifiability and falsifiability. But
Yes.
what our Shastras reveal, what the Veda reveals, the Upanishads reveal, they are neither verifiable nor falsifiable by any kind of empirical methods. So in that sense, using a modern definition of science tests, you cannot call it scientific. So in what way, I think there is something different way. I think we don't realize it when we use the term scientific. So I just wanted to clarify from you some more light on what you said.
Yeah. Thanks very much, Nitinji, for this question, because this is something we get into very frequently in our Gita satsangs, and of course, this is a very hot topic of debate, especially in this modern age. Last several decades, we have been having this debate, and there are so many of our Swamijis and great, saints and teachers. At the same time, there are great scientists, philosophers, and all of them. So first, I just want to say namaste to all of them and their thinking and their teachings, and the different things that they are expressing and giving to all of us to know about. So that is kind of the foundational starting point. I wanted to pay homage to that, because I do, during the course of my research for the book, I do rely on a lot of these things from the research. And of course, going back to my friends, they have given, and we have debated so many different things in the last several years with some of my friends who used to be very religious, and then they have become atheists, or some of them were agnostic, sitting on the fence, but then they have become either very religious or very, let's call them the scientific, and like you said, you have to prove everything empirically and all that. So having said that, you actually got to the core of what I was trying to do in the book, to show that the Gita is extremely scientific, and to also show that the Gita, actually, Krishna is very clever, or you can call it Veda Vyasa was very clever, Rishi Vyasa. Krishna Bhagavan is very, very clever, because he pulls from all the Upanishads. That's what I found out. That was my discovery. And everybody knows that, who has read the Gita and who is knowledgeable on the Upanishads, but this was my personal discovery. He pulls from all the Upanishads. So what I have been doing is, while I finished listening to Swamiji's lectures in the Gita, which I keep repeating once in a while anyway, because it is just a limitless amount of knowledge there. But I also have been listening to the Upanishads. So like I said, I'm listening to Brihadaranyaka now, which is the longest one. Listen to all the other principal Upanishads, every one of which Swamiji's, Guru Paranandaji's Tamil lectures are available. So while doing that, I was actually thinking how to start writing this book. And in talking with, of course, my friend Rajesh, I was telling him, I find this very, very scientific, and I feel very strongly about it. So that is how I'm going to start it. So even before getting into chapter 1 of the Gita, what I have tried to explain is why in my mind I consider it scientific. Yes, empirically, we cannot prove what the teachings of the Upanishads say, or what the Gita is proclaiming or claiming. But individually, there are hundreds of thousands of people who have experienced, who have gone through that state of being. You might want to call it whatever state it is, but they have given forth their findings and discovery, and they are talking about it, and they have lived that. So I cannot go and say, Paramacharya from Kanchi, or Ramakrishna Swamiji from the 1800s, or Swami Vivekananda. I cannot say that you are just talking. I cannot say you are lying. Or how can I say that when they have had individual experiences, when they have achieved moksha, or whatever it is that they are trying to tell us, right? Let us put it that way for the audiences. So what I set out to do in the book right at the beginning is why it is scientific in my mind. Okay, so what does science want? It has a certain method. It is a prescribed method, scientific method. So here the biggest difference is it is an individual empiricism. That's what I call it. It is empirically proved for you as an individual. It is not universally proved. Universal, you can call it universal empiricism or individual empiricism. Universal empiricism is what science always asks us for. Everybody should see the same experiment and the same result, right? And individual empiricism is what the claims of the scriptures and the teachings are. So, but to say that individually, if people are empirically experiencing and proving it through a very, very scientific method of Shravanam, Mananam, Nididhyasanam, meditation, and going through the stages of yoga meditation and achieving that moksha, how can we discount that? I don't think we can discount that at all, one bit. And to say that that is unscientific because I cannot see it is completely naive, I believe, and I have very strong opinions about this. It's very naive, and it is almost a little bit childish because you have not done the experiment. In fact, we spent 12 years, 16 years going to school learning about universal empiricism, right? We learn physics, chemistry, biology, everything for understanding the physical reality around us. But we do not for one moment question it while we are learning and getting all these absorbed into the brain. When I went to the temple and learned all the Purusha Suktam and Lakshmi Suktam and Rudram Chamakam, of course, the priest, I was too young to understand all that, fine. But there was an age where I could have got those principles deeply understood. But unfortunately, I did not get that because our education system has been directed that way. So we cannot claim that that is unscientific. First of all, do the experiment, but do it on yourself. You have to go and do the experiment, and then you come and tell me, no, this does not work. Of course, it works. I know it works. It is not yet worked fully for me, but I can tell you even a fraction, if I practice meditation, even a fraction of what Krishna says in the Gita, when I practice that, I can feel myself change. It has been a completely life-changing experience. So that is what I mean when I say scientific. There is a scientific method to it. But if we do not take the time to go and understand what is in the scriptures and what the Vedanta is talking about, then we cannot just sit on the sideline and say this does not work. Of course, there are a lot of people who have practiced it. If you take Sam Harris and different people like that, they're all great meditation practitioners, and they have gone through the different stages. But maybe they have not attained the state that some of the rishis and some of other Western practitioners have attained that state. I am not restricting this only to people who are knowledgeable about Gita and Upanishads. People in the West, whether they followed the Bible or any other Judaism or any religion, there is a spiritual experience that people go through. And we cannot say that that is unscientific without ourselves going through. The biggest difference being what I was saying, it is based on a personal individual experience. In fact, Professor, I want to mention this, Professor V. Krishnamurthy, fondly known as Professor VK, he was our director back in Pilani days. And he's a great prominent Vedic scholar, and he's almost probably pushing 95 years now, and he continues to write books, several books. And I got in touch with him, and he wrote such a generous and kind foreword for my book. So I wanted to really, thank him for it, and a huge namaste to him. then he, when I spoke to him last time I was in India, and I've been exchanging a lot of emails with him. So I told him about this, and he said, there are a lot of, here is my list of the books I wrote. Go and select some and read. So I got his latest book, Thus Spake Krishna, which is actually Indica publication. So I'm reading that. I'm also reading another book he wrote back in 2001. It's called Science and Spirituality. And I'm reading that, and every page takes at least half an hour for me to read and understand. It's a small book, but it is just so packed, just like Vedanta. And he explains, and it just blew my mind, because he has already thought through it, and he has explained it beautifully why this is scientific. So if I would highly recommend, if you haven't read that book, it would definitely answer this question much better than I am answering right now. But this is a core of what I address in the book. At every stage, I try to make a case that we have to practice it. And the guru says that in the book. Who is the one that's telling the students, and the students are constantly challenging. Why is this way? Why is it that way? And that's, I just wanted to mention the
Wonderful.
approach.
Wonderful. I think we have almost come to a conclusion of the session. I have one final question. So,
Yes.
how did this journey deeper into Vedanta that has happened during the COVID times, especially for you, how has this changed your approach to other aspects of life? For example, say your career, your family, the larger world. I know it's not that it's a part of the whole life journey which makes one, but still you have been doing this intense Shravana Manana in the last 2-3 years. So how do you see that has impacted your everyday life?
Yeah, it's an excellent question. So the first thing that has happened is, and I will say, my wife and children, they have seen me go through this. So in the spirit of universal empiricism, if you wanted to actually prove what I am saying scientifically, you have to go and ask them and do the experiment, saying, is what this guy is saying is actually true or not? But it has been a humongous change in the entire approach. And several of my friends, my family, and also my parents, friend, from the Gita Satsang, everybody sees that, and we all go through these changes. And like you said, it is a life journey, or life's journey, as we would say, right? It is probably multiple lives seeking the truth. So one of the things that I also write in the book is it is taking me towards these things called the 5 F's. So first, start with the faith and inquire into the teachings. So that this is something my friend always keeps insisting, that you have to have the faith. But then once you start reading the Gita, Krishna is very clear. He says, you have the faith, you come into this with the faith, and just take my teachings word for word, and then go from there. So that definitely, that is the faith. And you have to bring enormous focus and thinking to that. So that is the another F. And the outcome has been, to your question, Nitinji, is I just realized that there is so much of freedom of thinking, freedom of action, thoughts, words, deeds, everything. There is so much of freedom, and there are a lot of choices to be made. So before making choices for saying something, doing something, I have slowly, I personally feel I have changed in how I do certain things, how I think about certain things. I'm not going to claim that I'm completely transformed and I'm so it is a continuous journey, like you said, but there is a significant change to all of these approaches. Then the other big thing for me is the fearlessness, the bhayam, as we call it. I think, changed the entire outlook on how we go about life and our relationships and communications, even at the workplace, participation in meetings, how we do certain things and relate to one another, senior leadership, senior management people versus management people, and the working level teams and all that. The hierarchy is completely removed, and there is so much of fearlessness from all the teachings from whatever Krishna says in the Gita and from the Upanishads. And actually Swami Guruparananda ji says in, I forget the exact Upanishad, I think it was Taittiriya and Mandukya in the Karikas, right? Gaudapada's Karikas. He says that this is a key aspect of the Upanishads, to take your bayam out. And I listened to that after listening to several other scriptures before that. And I was thinking that is exactly what is happening. So the fearlessness is the other F. And the final thing is just taking the time to think. So I call it fertility of thought or fecundity of thought. The thinking has become more and more clear on both on the the so-called universal empirical scientific thinking, as well as the individual empirical scientific thinking. So I do proclaim also in the book, as a final thing, I will conclude by saying that I don't think these are divergent philosophies, the individual and the universal. I think we need to put them together, and that is the proposal I present to the readers, and just to think about it, is to bring those two together. When we do that, it can be extremely powerful, because the observer is as important as everything that is observed. And that is one of the essences of the Vedanta teaching, right? And there are a lot of people, scientists now, writing books on this consciousness principle being the core. There are different novels being published and all that. So there is, people are realizing there is scientific truth embedded, which we simply have not taken the time to learn. So that's that is how it has changed my life.
Wonderful, Dr. Raj. It has been a wonderful, very fascinating conversation. I think we touched upon many different aspects: science, spirituality, and how a honest pursuit of dharma and adhyatma has multiple effects on one's life, one's approach to world and everything. A fascinating journey you have had regarding spirituality. On the behalf of our Indica Moksha and all our audience, I thank you very much for making time for this session. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me, and it was a great discussion, and look forward to many more later. And thank you so much for Indica for this opportunity as well.
Thank
Namaste.
you. Thank you, Dr. Raj.
Yeah.
Viewers, with this, we conclude this session. Don't forget to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram for updates about our upcoming sessions. Shri Gurubhyo Namaha.
Shri Gurubhyo Namaha.